Brittany installed 8 security cameras in her own house, all to frame her mother-in-law for theft. What she didn't realize was, one of those cameras was about to capture something that would destroy her marriage forever. And it had absolutely nothing to do with the mother-in-law. Karma exists, and this story is proof. If you've ever felt like someone treated you unfairly, like someone judged you without knowing you, like someone wanted to tear you down for no reason, then stick around, because what you're about to hear will remind you that the truth always comes to light. Always. Eleanor dos Santos was 68 years old. Everyone called her Mrs. Eleanor, or just Eleanor. She was a black woman, stout, with grey hair cut very short because she no longer had the patience for elaborate hairstyles. She wore simple clothes, always clean, always ironed, because even though she didn't have money for luxuries, she had dignity to spare. She had raised her only son, Richard, completely alone. Her husband had died when Richard was just 8 years old. A construction accident at the site where he worked. No life insurance, no compensation, nothing. Eleanor had to do what millions of women in her situation do. Work, cleaning other people's houses, cooking for families who didn't even know her last name, spending more time taking care of other people's children than taking care of her own. But she did it. For 30 years she did it. And Richard grew up. He studied with scholarships. He graduated from a public university. He started his own tech company, and at 35 years old, he was a successful man. Eleanor should have been proud, and she was. But there was something that worried her. Brittany, Richard's wife. Brittany van der Linde was 34 years old when she married Richard. She was pretty, elegant. She came from a blue blood family. Although that money wasn't what it used to be. Brittany's family had fallen on hard times years ago, but she kept up appearances as if nothing had happened. When she met Richard at a company party, Brittany saw an opportunity. A successful man, hard-working, kind, and with the unforgivable flaw of loving his mother too much. During their courtship, Brittany was charming to Eleanor. She brought her gifts, she hugged her. She called her dear mother-in-law. Eleanor wanted to believe her. She wanted to think that her son had found someone good, but Eleanor had spent 30 years cleaning rich people's houses. She had seen how they treated the help when they thought no one was watching. She had learned to read the masks that people wore, and Brittany's mask had cracks, small details. A look of disdain when Richard wasn't looking, a comment about how Eleanor dressed. A way of pronouncing mother-in-law. That sounded more like an insult than a title. But Eleanor didn't say anything, because her son was happy, and she had learned long ago that some battles aren't worth fighting. The wedding was grand, expensive, paid for entirely by Richard, because Brittany's family could no longer afford those luxuries, even if they pretended otherwise. Eleanor attended in a dress she had bought at a thrift store. She sat in the front row. She cried tears of happiness when her son said, "I do," and she tried to ignore the way Brittany looked at her during the reception, as if she were a stain on a perfect photograph. After the wedding, things changed quickly. Richard bought a huge house in one of the best neighborhoods in the city. 5 bedrooms, pool, garden, everything Eleanor had never had and never asked for. Richard insisted that his mother live with them. "My mother sacrificed her whole life for me," he told Brittany. "Now it's my turn to take care of her." Brittany smiled and said it was a wonderful idea, but that night, in the privacy of their bedroom, she told Richard that maybe his mother would be more comfortable in her own apartment, with her independence, without having to share space. Richard didn't understand the hint, or he pretended not to. Eleanor moved into the bedroom on the 3rd floor, the one farthest from the master bedroom, the one Brittany chose specifically because it was near the service staircase. Like a maid, Eleanor thought when she saw the room, but she didn't say anything, because she had learned that silence was her best weapon. If this story is starting to upset you, If you're feeling rage towards Brittany, hold on, because what's coming is worse, much worse, but also much more satisfying in the end. The first few months were awkward, but tolerable. Brittany ignored Eleanor most of the time. When Richard was present, she was friendly. When he wasn't, she simply didn't exist. Eleanor learned to make herself invisible. She went down for breakfast when Brittany had already left. She ate alone in the kitchen. She spent the afternoons in her room or in the garden, out of the way. But then something changed. A pearl necklace disappeared from Brittany's jewelry box. Brittany stormed into Richard's room like a hurricane, shouting that her pearls had been stolen. Richard tried to calm her down. Maybe you left them somewhere else. Maybe they fell behind the furniture. But Brittany had a different theory. There's someone in this house who shouldn't be here, she said, looking directly towards the hallway, where Eleanor was standing, listening to everything. Richard was silent for a moment. Then he asked in a tense voice, "What are you insinuating, Brittany?" "Nothing. I'm just saying that pearls don't just disappear on their own." Eleanor felt her heart freeze after everything she had sacrificed. After a lifetime of honest work, this woman was accusing her of being a thief, but she didn't say anything. She turned around and went up to her room in silence. That night, Richard went to see her. He sat on his mother's bed and took her hands. "Mom, I know you didn't take anything. I don't even have to ask you." Eleanor nodded. "I know you know, son, but your wife doesn't, and that's a problem." Richard sighed. "Brittany is stressed. The job, the pressure. She'll get over it." Eleanor didn't say anything else, but they both knew that she wasn't going to get over it. The pearls appeared 3 days later, behind the living room sofa. Brittany said that they must have fallen off when she was putting them on. She didn't apologize to Eleanor. She didn't mention her accusations. She acted as if nothing had happened, but something had changed. Eleanor had seen Brittany's true face, and she knew that this was only the beginning. She wasn't wrong. Over the next few months, more things disappeared. A gold bracelet, a pair of diamond earrings, an antique watch that had belonged to Brittany's grandmother. Each time, Brittany made comments. Never direct accusations, just insinuations, glances. Sighs would ripple through the air whenever Eleanor entered a room. Richard tried to keep the peace. He searched for the missing items. Sometimes he found them, sometimes he didn't. But each incident left a mark, a crack in the relationship between his wife and his mother. What Richard didn't know, what no one knew except Brittany, was that she herself was hiding those jewels. She kept them in a box at the back of her closet. She'd wait a few days or weeks, and then she'd find them. Somewhere unexpected. The garden, the garage, the kitchen, never in Eleanor's room. That would be too obvious. Brittany was smarter than that. But each discovery reinforced the suspicion. If the jewels are appearing in strange places, it's because someone is moving them. And the only strange person in this house is the mother-in-law. Brittany was building a case, slowly, methodically, like a spider spinning its web, and Eleanor knew it. She saw everything from her silence. She observed how Brittany acted when she thought no one was watching. She noticed the contradictions, the details that didn't quite fit, but she still said nothing, because Eleanor had learned something in her 68 years of life. She had learned that the truth has its own time, that lies, however elaborate, eventually crumble under their own weight. And she had also learned something else, something that Brittany didn't suspect. One day, while cleaning the master bathroom, because despite not being the hot maid, Eleanor couldn't help but clean up the things she saw that were dirty. She found Brittany's phone on the sink. The screen was on. There was an open message. Eleanor didn't want to read it. It wasn't her custom to meddle in other people's lives, but the message was there, glowing on the screen, impossible to ignore. "I miss you. Tonight I can't. Richard's home. Tomorrow at 3 at the usual hotel. E. Eleanor read the message 3 times. She felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Her daughter-in-law. The woman accusing others of stealing. The woman who pretended to be perfect. Was cheating on her son. Eleanor put the phone exactly where she had found it. She left the bathroom, went up to her room, sat on the bed, and thought. She could tell Richard right now. She could go downstairs and show him the evidence. She could destroy her son's marriage with a single conversation. But what would happen then? Brittany would deny everything. She would say that Eleanor had fabricated the message, that she was a liar as well as a thief. And Richard would be caught between 2 women, not knowing whom to believe. No, Eleanor wasn't going to do that. She was going to wait, because the truth has its own time, and Brittany's time was about to run out. 2 weeks after the message, Brittany put her plan into motion. She came home one night with a perfectly rehearsed expression of panic. Richard was in the living room, reviewing work documents. Eleanor was in the kitchen, preparing soup. "My ring!" Brittany shouted from the entrance. "My engagement ring is gone!" Richard stood up immediately. "What? Where did you see it last?" "I left it in the jewelry box this morning, I'm sure, and now it's not there." They spent 3 hours searching. They checked every corner of the house, every drawer, every pocket. The ring didn't appear. Richard was exhausted. Brittany was furious. "This has to stop," Brittany said in a trembling voice, as if she was holding back tears. "I can't keep living like this. I can't keep losing my things. I can't keep feeling unsafe in my own house." Richard looked at her with a mixture of frustration and guilt. "What do you want me to do, Brittany? I want cameras in the whole house. I want to know who is doing this." Richard was silent for a moment. He looked towards the kitchen, where he could see the shadow of his mother through the door. "You can't be serious?" "I'm completely serious. If there's nothing to hide, there shouldn't be a problem, right?" Richard felt something break inside him. He was trapped. If he refused, it would seem like he was protecting a thief. If he agreed, he was betraying his mother. "Let me think about it," he said finally. Brittany smiled inwardly, although outwardly she maintained her victim expression. "Think about it carefully, honey. This is for everyone's sake." That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned in bed, thinking about his mother, about his wife, about the missing jewels that kept appearing in strange places. He didn't want to believe that his mother was capable of stealing. She was the woman who had worked her whole life cleaning other people's houses without taking so much as a pin. She was the woman who had taught him that honesty was more valuable than money. But he also loved Brittany, and Brittany seemed genuinely scared, genuinely affected. What should he do? The next morning, he made a decision. "I'm going to install the cameras," he told Brittany during breakfast, "but only for a month. If we don't find anything, we'll take them down and forget this whole thing." Brittany nodded solemnly, hiding her satisfaction. "That seems fair." Richard hired a security company that same day. They installed 8 high-definition cameras in strategic points of the house: the living room, the kitchen, the hallways, Richard's office, Brittany's dressing room. Each camera was connected to an app on both of their phones. They could review the recordings at any time. They could see in real time what was happening in every corner of the house. "Now," thought Brittany, "now I'm going to have the proof I need." But what Brittany didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that those cameras were going to capture much more than she expected. The days passed, then the weeks. Richard reviewed the recordings from time to time, more out of obligation than suspicion. He saw his mother moving around the house, cleaning, cooking, reading in the garden, watching soap operas in the living room. Nothing suspicious, nothing out of the ordinary. Brittany also reviewed them, more frequently, with more attention. looking for the perfect moment to plant the next jewel and capture Eleanor finding it. But there was a problem. Eleanor wasn't touching anything. Absolutely nothing. Since the cameras had been installed, Eleanor had become even more careful. She didn't enter rooms where she didn't have to be. She didn't open other people's drawers. She didn't move objects from their place. It was as if she knew she was being watched. And the truth is, she did know. Eleanor wasn't stupid. She had seen the technician installing the cameras. She had noticed the small devices in every corner of the house, and she had immediately understood what was happening. Her daughter-in-law had convinced her son to spy on her. The accusation of theft had become official. But instead of feeling offended, Eleanor felt something unexpected. Relief. Because if there were cameras in the house, that meant everything was being recorded. And if everything was being recorded, then the truth would eventually come to light. She just had to wait. What you would do with the information Eleanor had, the one from the cell phone message, would probably be different. Maybe you'd run to tell Richard. Maybe you'd confront Brittany directly. Maybe you'd make a huge scene. But Eleanor had learned something very valuable in her 68 years of life. She had learned that people who lie eventually trap themselves. You just have to give them enough rope. And Brittany had plenty of rope. One afternoon, while Richard was in an important meeting, Brittany decided it was time to act. She took the engagement ring she'd hidden in her closet weeks ago. She wrapped it in a handkerchief, and she dropped it discreetly behind the living room sofa, right below the camera that pointed towards the front door. Then she waited. At 6 o'clock in the evening, she called Richard, hysterical. "I found the ring," she shrieked into the phone. "It was behind the living room sofa. How did it get there? I never leave my jewelry in the living room. Someone put it there. Someone wanted me to find it." Richard arrived home 20 minutes later. He found Brittany sitting on the sofa with the ring in her hand, crying. "I want to see the recordings," Brittany said between sobs. "I want to see who put my ring behind the sofa." Richard nodded. He opened the app on his phone. He selected the living room camera. He rewound the recording to that morning. And then he saw something that made his blood run cold. At 11 o'clock in the morning, when Eleanor was in her room and the house was empty, someone entered the living room. It was Brittany. In the video, Brittany walked directly to the sofa. She took something out of her pocket. She dropped it behind the furniture, and then she left the room with a smirk. Richard paused the video. He looked at his wife. "What is this, Brittany?" Brittany's face turned as white as a sheet. "That's a mistake. That recording is wrong. Someone edited it." "Edited? Brittany, this is the original recording, from the system you yourself asked to install, from the system you yourself can verify." Brittany was speechless. Richard rewound the recording again. He watched it again and again. Each time the image showed the same thing. His wife planting the ring, fabricating evidence. "All the jewelry," Richard said, his voice trembling. "All the things that disappeared. That was you too, wasn't it?" "No, Richard, I can explain." "Explain to me. Explain to me why my wife is planting jewelry to accuse my mother of being a thief." Brittany opened her mouth, but no sound came out. And at that moment, something else appeared on Richard's phone screen, a notification from another camera, the one in the study. Richard opened the recording automatically, without thinking. It was from 2 days ago. There had been motion detected at 3 in the afternoon, when he was at the office and his mother was at a doctor's appointment. What he saw destroyed him completely. Brittany wasn't alone in the study. There was a man with her, and what they were doing left no room for doubt. Richard felt like the world was stopping. On his phone screen, in high definition, in bright colors, his wife was with another man. In his house, in his study, on the sofa where he sat to work every night. It wasn't an innocent hug. It wasn't a business visit. There was no way to misinterpret what he was seeing. His wife was cheating on him. Richard dropped the phone. His hands were shaking so much that he couldn't hold it. He felt his legs giving way. He collapsed onto the sofa. The same sofa where Brittany had found the ring that she herself had planted. Brittany saw the screen before it fell to the floor. She saw her own image. She saw Edward. She saw everything she had been hiding for 8 months. "Richard, honey, I can explain." But Richard wasn't listening to her. He had a lost look on his face, as if his brain had shut down to protect him from the pain. 8 months, he muttered finally. The app says motion was detected 2 days ago. But this didn't start 2 days ago, did it? How long, Brittany? How long have you been doing this to me? Brittany remained silent. How long? Richard shouted in a voice that didn't sound like his own. 8 months, Brittany whispered. Since March. Richard closed his eyes. 8 months, more than half a year. While he was working to give her everything, while he was defending his wife from the supposed unjust accusations against his mother, while he was installing cameras to prove Brittany's innocence and Eleanor's guilt. And who is he? Brittany didn't answer. Who is he, Brittany? If I'm going to lose my marriage, I at least deserve to know who for. Edward, the bank manager, the one who handles our accounts. Richard let out a bitter laugh. The bank manager, the man who sees me every week, the man who shakes my hand and tells me I'm his best client. That Edward. Brittany nodded silently. Richard got up from the sofa. He walked to the window. He looked at the garden where his mother sometimes sat to read, the garden he had bought with the money he earned, working 14 hours a day. The jewelry, he said without turning around. The pearls, the earrings, the bracelet. Your grandmother's watch. That was all you too, wasn't it? Not just the ring. Everything. Brittany didn't answer. Answer me. Yes. Richard turned around slowly. Why? Why hide your own jewelry? Why accuse my mother? Because I wanted you to kick her out. I wanted you to send her to a nursing home. I wanted this house all to myself. For you and Edward, you mean? Brittany lowered her gaze. Richard walked toward her. He stopped a yard away. He looked at her as if she were a stranger, as if he had never known her. My mother, he said in a trembling voice. The woman who worked her whole life to raise me. The woman who cleaned other people's houses so I could study. The woman who never took anything that wasn't hers. You accused her of being a thief. You humiliated her. You made her feel like a criminal in her own home. Brittany started to cry. I'm sorry, Richard, I'm so sorry. I was confused. Edward filled my head with ideas. I didn't mean to. You didn't mean to. You installed the cameras, Brittany. You convinced me to spy on my own mother. You planted the ring today, 3 hours ago. I saw it on the recording, you alone. It was a mistake. It was all a mistake. No, a mistake is forgetting an appointment. A mistake is burning the food. What you did was a plan. Systematic, calculated, for months. Richard pulled his cell phone out of his pocket. He dialed a number. What are you doing? Brittany asked, panicked. Calling my lawyer. Richard, please, we can talk about this. We can go to therapy. There's nothing to talk about. We have a prenup, Brittany. You signed it 3 years ago. In case of proven infidelity, you receive nothing. And I just recorded your confession. Brittany went pale. You can't do this to me. I have rights. We've been married for 3 years. And 8 months cheating on me. The math isn't on your side. The lawyer answered on the 3rd ring. Richard spoke for 5 minutes. He explained the situation. He mentioned the recordings. He mentioned the confession. He mentioned the prenup. When he hung up, Brittany was sitting on the floor, head in her hands. My lawyer will be here first thing tomorrow morning. You have until then to pack your things and get out of my house. This is my house too. No, this is the house I bought with my money. The house that's in my name. The house where you brought your lover while I was at work. You have no claim to this house. Brittany lifted her head. And where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. At that moment, a voice came from the staircase. Richard. It was Eleanor. She was standing on the last step in her nightgown, her grey hair dishevelled. She had heard the shouting. She had come down to see what was happening. Richard looked at her, and for the first time in months, he saw his mother for real. He saw the wrinkles that the stress had deepened. He saw the dark circles from sleepless nights. He saw the hunched posture of someone who has been treated like a criminal in her own house. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." He walked toward her. He hugged her, and for the first time since he was a child, Richard cried in his mother's arms. "There, honey, there. It's okay now. Don't apologize for things you didn't do. I should have believed you. I should have trusted you. I've known you since I was born. I should have known you would never take anything. I know, honey. I know." Brittany watched them from the floor, her eyes red, her makeup smeared. "This is ridiculous," she said bitterly. "You're going to believe that old woman over your own wife?" Eleanor separated herself from her son. She walked toward Brittany slowly. She stopped in front of her. "Honey," she said in a surprisingly soft voice, "I know about the message, about the hotel, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I've known for weeks." Brittany stared at her in horror. "What? I saw your cell phone in the bathroom. The screen was on. The message was right there. I miss you. I can't tonight. Richard's home. Tomorrow at 3 at the usual hotel." Brittany was speechless. "I didn't say anything because I knew the truth would come out on its own. It always does. Lies have short legs, honey, and yours just tripped." Richard looked at his mother. "You knew? All this time you knew?" "Yes. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you would have asked me how I knew, and it would have just been my word against hers. The word of the old, fat, grey-haired mother-in-law against the word of the young, beautiful wife. Who would have believed me? You needed to see it with your own eyes. You needed to find out for yourself." Richard closed his eyes. "How much you suffered in silence, Mum. How many humiliations you endured knowing the truth. It doesn't matter now, honey. What matters is that you know now." Brittany got up from the floor. "This is a conspiracy. You're both against me. That old woman manipulated this whole thing. She did." "Enough!" Richard's voice was so firm that Brittany stopped instantly. "Not one more word against my mother. You've done enough damage. You've accused her of enough things. It's over." Brittany glared at him with hatred. "You're going to regret this, Richard. I'm going to tell everyone what you did to me. I'm going to destroy your reputation. I'm going to—" "You're going to what? You're going to tell everyone that your husband caught you cheating? You're going to tell them you planted jewelry, to accuse your mother-in-law of being a thief? You're going to tell them you brought your lover to the house while your husband was at work? Go ahead. Tell it all. Let's see who comes out looking worse." Brittany clenched her fists. "This isn't over. For me, it is over. Tomorrow you talk to my lawyer. Tonight you sleep in the guest room, and you stay away from my mother." Brittany stomped up the stairs. She slammed the bedroom door, making the walls shake. Richard stayed in the living room, standing next to his mother, staring at the empty staircase. "What am I going to do now, Mum?" Eleanor took his hand. "You're going to rest. Tomorrow you'll make the decisions you need to make. Tonight, just rest." Richard nodded. "Thank you, Mom, for everything, for putting up with it, for waiting, for not abandoning me even though I treated you unfairly." Eleanor smiled. "You're my son. I'll never abandon you, no matter what." Richard hugged her again, tighter, longer, as if he wanted to make up for all the hugs he hadn't given her in the last few months. That night, neither of them slept well. But for the first time in a long time, they slept in peace. The next morning arrived with a clarity that seemed impossible after everything that had happened. Richard's lawyer arrived at 9. He was a serious man in an impeccable suit, with a briefcase full of documents. He sat down in the dining room with Richard while Eleanor made coffee. Brittany came downstairs at 10. Her eyes were swollen. Her hair was a mess. Her clothes from the day before were wrinkled. She hadn't slept at all. "Good morning, ma'am," the lawyer said without getting up. "I'm Mr. Mendoza. I represent your husband in this divorce proceeding." "Divorce?" Brittany repeated, as if the word was new. Yes, divorce on the grounds of proven adultery. We have the security camera recordings. We have your verbal confession from last night, which my client recorded on his cell phone. And we have the prenup that you signed 3 years ago. Brittany sat down heavily in a chair. I want to talk to Richard, alone. My client does not wish to speak with you alone. Any communication will be through me. This is ridiculous. I have rights. I'm his wife. For now, the divorce process has already begun. According to the prenup, in the case of proven infidelity, the unfaithful party loses all rights to shared assets, alimony, and any property acquired during the marriage. Brittany went pale. But I don't have anything. I don't have a job. I don't have savings. I don't have... You should have thought of that before you had a lover for 8 months, the lawyer interrupted without any emotion in his voice. Richard spoke for the first time. Brittany, I'm not going to leave you on the street. I'm not that kind of person. I'll give you enough money for 3 months of rent and basic expenses. After that, you'll have to fend for yourself. Brittany looked at him with a mix of relief and resentment. 3 months, that's all 3 years of marriage meant. 3 months. 3 years of marriage and 8 months of betrayal. We're even. Brittany lowered her head, defeated. The rest of the morning was a parade of documents, signatures and boxes. Brittany packed her belongings in silence. Clothes, shoes, beauty products. The remaining jewelry, the pieces she hadn't hidden, stayed. Richard insisted they were gifts and she could keep them. Brittany refused. I don't want anything of yours, whatever. At 2 in the afternoon, a taxi waited outside. Brittany came down with 3 suitcases. She didn't look at anyone. She didn't say goodbye, but before getting into the cab, she stopped. She turned around. She looked directly at Eleanor, who stood in the doorway. This is your fault, she spat, venom lacing her voice. All of this is your fault. If you hadn't existed, if you'd had the decency to leave when you should have, none of this would have happened. Eleanor didn't respond. No need to. You're going to end up alone, Brittany continued, her voice dripping with malice. Richard will find another woman, and that woman will hate you too. All daughters-in-law hate their mothers-in-law. It's human nature. You're going to die alone, you disgusting old hag. Alone and forgotten. Eleanor took a step forward. Honey, she said calmly, I've been alone before. I've lost my husband. I've raised my son without help. I've cleaned houses where they treated me like dirt. I've endured things you can't even imagine, and I'm still here, standing tall, with my dignity intact. You can say whatever you want. You can insult me. You can hate me, but none of that will change who I am, or who you are. Brittany opened her mouth to respond, but she couldn't find the words. Get in the taxi, honey. Go start your new life, and hopefully, one day, you'll learn that happiness isn't built by destroying others. Brittany got into the taxi without saying another word. The car pulled away, disappearing down the street. And so, without fanfare or explosions, Richard and Brittany's marriage ended. Richard closed the door. He looked at his mother. How can you be so calm after everything she said to you? Eleanor shrugged. Rage is a poison you drink, hoping the other person dies. It's not worth it. Richard smiled for the first time in days. You're amazing, Mom. I'm not amazing. I'm just old. And old people learn things that young people don't understand yet. They embraced in the hallway. A long hug. A hug of reconciliation. A hug that signified the beginning of something new. But this story doesn't end here. Because karma hadn't finished its work. A week after the divorce, Richard made a decision. He felt he had to do something more. Something that would completely close this chapter of his life. He looked up the number for Eduardo's wife. Her name was Patricia. She was an accountant. She had 2 young children with Eduardo. They'd been married for 11 years. Richard hesitated for hours. What right did he have to destroy another marriage? What did he gain by making an innocent woman and her children suffer? But then he thought of something else. He thought of Patricia going to sleep every night next to a man who was cheating on her. He thought of her trusting someone who didn't deserve her trust. He thought about what he would have wanted someone to do for him. The truth hurts, but lies destroy. He called Patricia that afternoon. The conversation was brief, awkward, painful. Richard explained who he was. He explained what he had discovered. He offered to send her the recordings as proof. Patricia didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just said, "Thank you for telling me," and hung up. Richard never knew exactly what happened next. But 2 months later, he saw on social media that Patricia had changed her marital status to single, and that Eduardo no longer worked at the bank. Karma has its own way of balancing things out. Meanwhile, life in Richard's house changed completely. Without Brittany, without the accusations, without the constant tension, the house felt different, lighter, more peaceful. Like someone had opened all the windows and let in fresh air, Eleanor went back to being herself. She cooked the dishes Richard had loved since he was a child. She sang while she cleaned, even though no one asked her to. She went out into the garden to care for the plants she had neglected during the months of conflict. Richard spent more time at home. He worked fewer hours. He ate dinner with his mother every night. He told her about his day. He asked about hers. They were simple conversations about the weather, about the news, about the neighbors, but they were real conversations, without masks, without tension, without the ghost of Brittany floating between them. One night, 3 months after the divorce, Richard came home with a large box. "What's that, honey?" Eleanor asked from the kitchen. "A gift. For you." Eleanor came out, drying her hands with a dish towel. She looked at the box with curiosity. "For me? But it's not my birthday." "I don't need a special date to give you gifts, Mom." "Open it." Eleanor opened the box carefully. Inside was a dress, navy blue, elegant, her size, with a string of genuine pearls. "Honey, this is too much. I can't accept this." "Of course you can. You deserve it. You deserve this and so much more." Eleanor took the dress out of the box. She held it up in front of her, her eyes filled with tears. "It's beautiful. Like you, Mom." They embraced in the kitchen, with the smell of dinner in the background, with the blue dress between them. "I love you, honey, and I love you, Mom. Forgive me for everything that happened. Forgive me for not protecting you better. There's nothing to forgive. The important thing is that we're here, together." Richard pulled away and looked her in the eyes. "You know what, Mom? I'm going to do something. I'm going to remove the cameras, all of them. We don't need them anymore." Eleanor smiled. "We never needed them, honey. The truth doesn't need cameras to come to light. It just needs time." Richard nodded. "You're right, as always." That night, Richard uninstalled all the cameras in the house. He stored them in a box in the garage. He didn't throw them away because they were expensive, but he never used them again. Months passed, then years. Richard eventually started dating again, carefully, cautiously, with his eyes more open than before. He met a woman named Jessica. She was a schoolteacher, a widow, with a 10-year-old daughter named Lily. Jessica was different from Brittany in every way. She was simple, honest. She didn't care about Richard's money. She cared about Richard. And most importantly, she adored Eleanor. From day one, Jessica treated Eleanor with respect. She asked her for cooking tips. She asked about her life. She invited her to her family gatherings. Eleanor, for her part, adored Lily. The little girl reminded Richard of himself when he was a child. Curious, joyful, always asking questions. 2 years after the divorce, Richard asked Gabriella to marry him. This time, before buying the ring, he spoke with his mother. "Mom, I'm thinking about proposing to Gabriella, but I want your opinion first. If you don't approve, I won't do it." Eleanor looked at him with surprise. "Honey, you don't need my approval to get married." "Yes, I do. Last time, I didn't listen to you. Last time, I ignored the signs. This time, I want to do things right. Eleanor remained silent for a moment. Then she smiled. Gabriella is a good woman. I see it in her eyes. I see it in how she treats you. I see it in how she treats Valentina. And I see it in how she treats me. Not like a burden, not like a nuisance, but like family. So, you have my blessing? Richard asked. You have more than my blessing. You have my joy. Richard proposed to Gabriella that very night. She said yes, crying tears of happiness. The wedding was small, intimate, in the garden of the house, only close family and true friends. Eleanor wore the blue dress that Richard had given her. She put on her pearl necklace. She sat in the first row, and when her son said, "I do," she cried tears of happiness, just like at the first wedding. But this time, the tears were different. This time, they were tears of real hope. During the reception, Gabriella approached Eleanor. "Thank you," she said, hugging her. "Thank you for raising this wonderful man. Thank you for being the mother-in-law I always dreamed of." Eleanor hugged her back. "Thank you for making him happy. It's the only thing I ever wanted for him." And now, you might be wondering what happened to Brittany. Brittany went to live with her parents after the divorce. The family that had pretended to be blue blood could no longer maintain the charade. They lived in a small apartment in a middle-class neighborhood, far from the luxuries Brittany had become accustomed to. Eduardo abandoned her shortly after his wife discovered him. Turns out, Brittany wasn't the only mistress. There were two others. Eduardo was a collector of unhappy women. Brittany tried to get a job, but she had spent 3 years without working. No recent experience, no references, no updated skills. She ended up working as a receptionist in a dental office, earning less in a month than she used to spend in a day when she was married to Richard. Sometimes, when she was alone in her small apartment, eating frozen food in front of the television, she thought about the big house, the garden, the pool, everything she had lost. And she thought about Eleanor, the fat old woman she had tried to destroy, the mother-in-law she had accused of being a thief, the woman who now lived in the house that should have been hers. Karma, Brittany thought on those lonely nights. Damn karma. But this story isn't about Brittany. This story is about Eleanor, a woman who was born poor, who grew up poor, who worked her entire life cleaning other people's houses, who lost her husband too young, who raised her son completely alone. A woman who was accused, humiliated, watched, and despised by the person who should have respected her. A woman who kept silent when she could have spoken, who waited when she could have acted, who trusted the truth when everyone considered her a liar, and in the end, the truth proved her right. Today, as I write this story, Eleanor is 72 years old. She lives with her son, her daughter-in-law, and her adopted granddaughter Valentina in the same house where everything happened. She is the matriarch of the family, the grandmother everyone adores, the woman who cooks the best pot roast in the neighborhood, the lady who always has a wise word for anyone who needs it. When they ask her about Brittany, Eleanor doesn't speak ill of her. She only says that she hopes she has found peace, that she hopes she has learned, that she hopes she is happy wherever she is, because Eleanor doesn't hold grudges. She never did. She never will. Resentment, she says, is like carrying stones in your pockets, waiting to throw them at someone. But the stones only weigh you down. If you got this far, if you listen to this whole story, I want you to remember something. Silence is not weakness. Patience is not cowardice. Dignity is not lost by the accusations of others. And the truth, however long it takes, always finds its way to the light. Eleanor knew it. She always knew it. Her silence wasn't fear. It was strategy. Her patience wasn't passivity. It was wisdom. Her dignity wasn't pride. It was truth. And when it was all over, when the masks fell, when the lies crumbled, Eleanor was still standing, old and victorious. Not because she had fought, but because she didn't need to. The last time I spoke with Richard to write this story, I asked him what was the biggest lesson he had learned from all this. He was quiet for a moment. Then he told me something I'll never forget. I learned that the people who make the most noise are usually the ones who have the most to hide, and the people who are the most silent are usually the ones who have the most to say. My mother never defended herself because she didn't need to. Her entire life was her defense. 72 years of honesty, 72 years of work, 72 years of dignity. No accusation could erase that. And Eleanor, what did she say when I asked her the same thing? She smiled, settled into her chair in the garden, looked at the flowers she had planted years ago, and said 5 words that summarize this entire story. My silence wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. People who lie trap themselves. You just have to give them enough rope, and Brittany had plenty of rope. If you know someone like Eleanor, someone who endures in silence, someone who waits with patience, someone who maintains their dignity when everyone attacks them, let them know that you admire them, because that silence isn't easy, that patience isn't comfortable, that dignity comes at a cost, but in the end, it's always worth it, always. And if you are someone like Eleanor, if you're going through something similar, if someone is accusing you unfairly, if someone is trying to destroy you, remember this. The truth has its own time, lies crumble on their own, and karma exists. This story is proof.